We are 81 games in. That's right. We are at the halfway mark, folks. And that means we're handing out the Midseason awards on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Helps if I unloop things. Hey, what's up and welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have been through the thicks and the thins and all the different goods and bads when it comes to this franchise. And we are bringing the Reds daily to you on the Locked On Reds podcast that is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day. I want to thank you for joining us on this live bonus edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. On today's episode, we'll go over who is the first half MVP, who is the best pitcher for the Reds in the first half, and an award that we don't love to give out, but who's been the most disappointing Red of the first half of this season so far. And we'd love to hear from you on that on this live show. Make sure you jump down into the comments section here on our YouTube page. Let us know who your MVP, your best pitcher, and your most disappointing player is. And give us your questions and your comments about other things Reds related as well. We're happy to have you along on this live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Steve, there's just been a very tumultuous first half of the season for the Reds. Not what we expected. That is definitely true. But there have been some good performances, and we definitely want to dive into those. That's on today's episode that's brought to you by Booking.com. Yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your next stay today. So let's start first, because I tend to believe that MVP is a given. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. So let's start with best pitcher. Who you got?
Oh, great. Throw me a curveball before we even have a chance to get this thing running. I'm not on that screen, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Maybe a back foot breaker? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly what you did. You know, as much as we have hyped up his inability to live up to expectation, as much as we have said that the pressure has been a lot for him and he hasn't lived up to it, for me, it's Hunter Greene this year. We have seen Hunter Greene make the evolution and really begin to move from being a thrower to being a pitcher, and not a thrower upper, a thrower to being a pitcher. So Hunter Greene, I think, is turning that corner. And I think if his progression, if his trajectory for the 2024 baseball season continues, he's going to finish the season with fantastic numbers, but he's going to finish this season also as the bona fide number one ace starting pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. Opening day will not be a question next year. He's going to be the guy that they build a rotation around moving forward. And for me, you know, while it's an about time feeling, it's also a God, what a relief, because if this didn't happen, it would derail the franchise. So the fact that Hunter is finally pulling all of the strings together, I'm all in on Hunter Greene as the best pitcher of the first half.
I tend to agree with you. I would look at Nick Lodolo as the argument for that. Nick Lodolo himself has also taken a step forward that I don't even necessarily think we expected. I mean, his whole thing this year was just stay healthy, man. And the current thing that's got him on the injured list, the blister, if you listen to us, we've told you till we're blue in the face, it's not because he's hurt. Now, maybe there is a blister issue, but this is a load management thing, and they are making sure to limit his starts just every little bit along the way so that he is fresh for the stretch run, whatever that might look like. But I do think that Nick Lodolo has an argument. When you look on some different sites and things like that, he is close in wins above replacement, but the things that he can control are just absolutely phenomenal. He keeps the ball on the ground at a pretty decent rate, above league average rate. He does a really good job of striking guys out while also not walking guys at all. In fact, according to statistics, league average walk percentage is a little over 8%. He's at 6.5. And his strikeout percentage is right there with Hunter Greene. I think I would give Hunter Greene a little bit of an edge here on this, but Nick Lodolo has made this back what we thought it was. Remember in 2022, as horrible as that season was, there was two things that we were like, ooh, I think we got something here. And that was the fact that we have ace 1A and 1B in Nick Lodolo and Hunter Green. And I firmly believe that that is the case. I do see a couple of folks making cases here. Snellbeast checks in, says could have a case for Fernando Cruz. And I would agree with that. My only trepidation with that is I find that starting pitchers are more valuable than relief pitchers. So it's hard for me, like, unless we're talking about just an absolute stud performance, like, honestly, Emmanuel Clase for the Guardians has an argument on that team to be their best pitcher because he is just so phenomenal. But, like, that's how good you got to be, almost perfect as a reliever to be better than a good starting pitcher. And I just think that the Reds have two really good starting pitchers that kind of put Cruz to third, maybe even fourth if you want to compare him to Andrew Abbott when it comes to that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. You kind of took all the thunder on that.
Sorry.
You're right in why I don't think it's Cruz as the best pitcher on this team. If you want to break it down to starting pitcher bullpen, then absolutely. I'm giving bullpen fireman of the first half. Yes. Let's trademark that. Get on the trademark site right now. The Locked On Reds fireman of the first half would definitely be Cruz. But for me, I'm going to stay in that Hunter Green camp. Although the argument for Nick Lodolo, and it's close. I see that coming through the comment section here that, half of one, 6 dozen of another. They're not that far apart. And I think I just give the nod to Hunter Green just by a smidge. When we reevaluate this at the end of the year, hopefully it's an even harder conversation because these two guys push each other in the second half. You've talked about the fact that the Lodolo injured list stint now is a lot more about load management than it is the blister. I think it could be a great 1-2 punch as we talk about the potential of a wild card.
No, I would agree with that too. And quite frankly, that's been the biggest question coming into this season. Now, the biggest question about this team has changed. It's what on earth is the outfield moving forward? But coming into this season, the biggest question was, what are we getting out of our starting rotation? The answer is we're getting two studs, two dudes that whenever the managers for the All-Star game sit down and look at their rosters and see what kind of pitchers can we add to this team, they're going to be looking at Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo. And not simply because the Reds need a representative. That likely, if you're picking somebody, that's likely going to be Ellie De La Cruz. But Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo have arguments for being on the team based on merit, not just based on necessity. So I think that this was kind of the discussion as to how the rest of the awards would pan out. Andrew Abbott, I talked about his performance yesterday, and I mean, I think he is just an absolute stud number 3 for this rotation. He shows you that even in the days when he has his worst stuff, he still can lead the team to a victory, and I love that about him, but I don't think his best is as good as Hunter Green or Nick Lodolo's is. I think that they're just slightly above him in that. So I love what the Reds have on the pitching side of things. Now, there are a couple of pitchers that I would put into our discussion here in a few minutes whenever we bring up most disappointing player of the first half of this season. We'll look at some of those as well. But I also definitely want to talk about the MVP of this team because, quite frankly, I think there's a lot of folks that wanted to slap the overhyped tag on him. They wanted to declare him a bust because he struck out too much, and everybody's got to eat some crow on that. We're gonna eat, or not we're. I've been saying this all along that he's amazing. Some folks are gonna eat some crow coming up next. This episode of Locked On Reds is brought to you by Booking.com. Yeah, with summer travel heating up, especially travel to and from baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're even talking about, St. Louis, Milwaukee, Chicago, all that stuff. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your rival's city. It's nice to have something where you can get everything all in one place because the different travels that I've been on, Booking.com makes it so easy. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or on the Booking.com app. And as baseball season goes along, as summer goes along, FanDuel has so many different promotions and different things for you to take advantage of. All kinds of different boosts. They love to boost the same game parlays during baseball season, which is great for the Ellie parlay. I mean, Ellie is as hot as the surface of the sun right now at the plate, and you got to be taking advantage of the Ellie parlay over at FanDuel. Plus, if you find yourself a nice boost or something like that, they can usually boost it, sometimes up to 30% as far as what your payout could be. Of course, we're talking about the Ellie parlay, which is Ellie to get at least a steal, at least a run scored, and at least 2 total bases in a game. Bam, hits that parlay. Most of the time it's around plus 400, 4-1 odds, maybe even 5-1 odds, depending on who's pitching. But he's been hitting everybody this here recently, so go hit it over at FanDuel.com and check out all of the promotions that they have going on this baseball season. Add that bid win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook.
You have got to check out Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 streaming sports channel programmed for you each and every day to bring you the biggest stories in sports. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinion, and news from our national hosts as well as local experts like Jeff and I. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Jeff, we talked about the pitchers. It's time to talk about the position players. And, it's not often we get a softball like this that's just an absolute no-brainer without a real argument to it. So I think that we never really wavered on Ellie. We never really gave up on Ellie, and we were never really as disappointed as some others were when he did have some struggles. And you get to the midway point, 81 games in, Ellie De La Cruz is the hands down MVP of the first half for the Cincinnati Reds. If you want to just take it a straight, simple, cut and dry OPS plus look at the thing, he's 28% better than league average, leads the team in OPS plus, and without a number, without a metric, let's do it old school, Big Red Machine style. Let's use our gut. If you take one player out of this lineup, if you remove one guy from this team that would have the most dramatic, devastating impact on the Cincinnati Reds, it would be Ellie De La Cruz. Without Ellie, help us over. Yeah. He's our only hope. You know what I mean? There's just no turning back from a loss like that.
Ellie won Kenobi. Yeah, I think that when I look at this roster, that's the one thing that stopped me from making a joke about like, oh my gosh, what else could happen to this roster? Because I don't like put a bubble around them, get the shield generator going, make sure that nothing touches Ellie De La Cruz. Because if you take him out of this lineup, there is no teeth. Like, yeah, Spencer Steer has nice games. Jonathan India has been on fire here recently. Jeimer Candelario has had a heck of a month of June. All these different guys have done these things, but Ellie De La Cruz has done it all season. And sure, he's had a little bit of a dip, but consider the slump that he went through there in May and all the stuff that he is still doing. I mean, the over-under on steals for him was 40 for the season. He gets 2 more, he hits the over-under.
Did you take that?
I smashed the over. I absolutely smashed that over. I want to say his home runs, I think they were at 27.5, so he's still got some work to do with those. But, I mean, all of the stuff that he is able to do, and we saw it yesterday where it was 1-2 punch with India and him at the top of the lineup where India hits a single and then he hits a triple, Reds are up 1-0. He doesn't have to hit home runs all the time. He can just be, and he's gotten very good at this, he can just be very good at placing line drives in the gap. Because when he hits the gap, that's a double all day, maybe even a triple in most cases for him. Because he is just able to take that extra base. He is so very good, and we are just we're continuing to see him blossom. I know that and I know that you have tried to hit me over the head with a book when I tried to do this sort of thing, but we have ascribed a lot of hype to Elly De La Cruz, and he's living up to every bit of it.
He is. And I don't want some of the accomplishments of some of the other guys to be lost in this, Jeff, because it's easy to talk about the electricity and the impact of Elly De La Cruz. But you hit on two guys that I have a note here to myself to call an honorable mention category.
Yes.
And that is what Jonathan India and Jeimer Candelario have done. And for different reasons, I look at them. I look at Jonathan India first and foremost, because let's go back to the offseason. Let's go back to before things got underway. Jonathan India was the expendable man. Jonathan India was the guy that, look, we don't have a spot for you. If you want to be a meaningful part of this team, you're going to have to move around. We don't care that you were the rookie of the year. Second base is no longer your home. You're going to be used where we think you give us the best opportunity to have a little bit of an advantage in the lineup. And Jonathan India was all in. He's out there in spring training, taking fly balls in the outfield. He's out there doing every single thing the Reds asked of him. And his performance has not suffered because of it. He put his head down and started to grind, and he got the work done, and he's playing phenomenal ball right now. He is second in the team in OPS plus right now at 118. He's been playing 18% better than league average for a guy that a lot of people were ready to just move on from. Trade him, get rid of him. We don't need him. We don't need Jonathan India. What are you talking about? We got these other guys. So second on the team in OPS plus. And then you get to Jeimer Candelario, the great mystery signing, right? The great head scratcher of what the world is Nick Kroll doing. Then he comes in here and he stinks up the joint like Will Myers. I mean, it was very reminiscent of that signing, right? To the point that after the Texas series, I famously lashed out and called him out. And you tried to temper that a little bit, and you ended up being right that Jeimer was going to get hot. And man, did he get hot, because, and let's just look at the last month for Jeimer Candelario, 277, 315, 597 with 10 home runs and 22 RBIs. Jeimer Candelario has arrived, and those are a tremendous 1-2-3 punch for this lineup when you're talking about Elly, Jonathan India, and Jeimer Candelario. So I want to honorable mention those guys, because no, they're not Elly. And each of them has individual flaws within their game and things that they've been dealing with. But that group together is what's really been the only driver of the engine that is the Reds lineup, because of all the injuries to everybody else. So while it is Elly, I like those other guys as well for what they've contributed in the first half.
So we're both calling it. I mean, no contest whatsoever between Elly. Let's call Elly Batman. So who's Robin? Is it India? Is it Candelario? Or is it Spencer Steer? Spencer Steer has had a bit of an up and down season, not as consistent as we would have thought it would have been, but he has still been very valuable to this team. And quite frankly, if you look at how the OPS, not even just the OPS plus, but the OPS number is situated, basically the top four of the lineup is India, De La Cruz, Candelario, Spencer Steer, whenever Candelario's tendinitis isn't going crazy. And there's a reason for that. That is not necessarily in that order, because Elly is first and Candelario is second. But the top four OPS on the team is the top four in the lineup, and he has come up with big hits whenever they've needed it, leads the team in RBIs, which, some old hats will love that. But this surprises me a little bit, because if you'd ask me who leads this team in doubles, I would have said without looking, Elly. It's not. It's Spencer Steer. Spencer Steer leads the team in doubles. And by the way, that game yesterday, that was doubles parade. It was just you get a double, you get a double, you get a double. But
was I the only one? Was I the only one thinking inside the park home run on Ellie's triple?
Because the way that and I can't remember the name of the center fielder for the Cardinals, but the way that he tripped over the ball and hit the wall and took a second to hey, what's real life again, and then pick up the ball. I'm like, if he bobbles it just even for another second more, I think they're sending him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with your. I agree with your Spencer Steer inclusion there, but I don't think he's the answer. I talked at the beginning of the season that I felt like Spencer Steer was the most important player on this team. We talked about most valuable player versus who's important. I still think Spencer Steer is really, really important to this team because of the flexibility that he creates. And he just goes out and is good at everything they ask him to do. Not always great, but not ever really horrible. He's just good. And I think your team needs that. But if we're gonna give a 1B award for the first half, then I'm giving it to Jamer for a couple reasons. He's third on the team in OPS plus right now. But like I said, his last 30 days have been just stellar. And when you look at, from the beginning of May to now, he's an all-star. So for me, he would be my pick. If you wouldn't let me give it to Ellie De La Cruz, like if you did that thing where, we all know what the right answer is, so get creative. I give it to Jamer based on his May through now.
I would love to say that I disagree with you, but I do think that Candelario is Robin in this case. I think India's got an argument, but it's only just because I'm sorry, I clicked off your comment there on accident. You can't do that.
Yeah, hey, I'm taking my lumps, folks. You're right. I have never been more happy to be wrong.
But I think that had India done it for longer, like you talked about the ups and downs of India's year so far, consider the fact that even just back on May 23rd, which was not that long ago, just a little bit over a month ago, he was batting .208. That's how hot he's been for the last month plus. And had he been doing it for a little bit longer, I think he would have had an easy argument for Robin, maybe an argument for Batman in this case. So looking at him the rest of the way, I would love to see him continue, because when you look at his peripheral stats, man, he is not chasing the ball, he is not missing the ball, and he's taking a lot of walks. So if you can add in some hits and you can add in that extra base power that we've been seeing here recently, dude, we're going to talk about India staying around this team for much longer and being really hard to trade, because how do the Reds give up on a guy like that? Instead of, where does he fit? And I think that is amazing in and of itself, that he's been able to turn that around.
It's looking pretty genius that was a 2-year deal they gave him. At least they don't have to worry about this next year.
Exactly.
All right,
so,
Jeff.
Yeah.
Let's move off of some of the happy feel goods that we've been doing. We do need to talk about the other side of this coin, which is which pitcher and which hitter have been the biggest disappointments in 2024. We're going to talk about them coming up next.
If you are not getting down to the ballpark this season with Game Time, you need to fix that right now, because that's how I get to the ballpark. That's how you should too. They've got the best last minute deals when it comes to baseball. I always go down to the Reds game, hang out around the banks, find a little watering hole, get a cold beverage, something like that, and then find the best deals on the Game Time app. You can get some crazy good lightning deals and stuff like that close to Game Time. Game Time has so many great deals, and they show you the all-in pricing right there. When you click on it, when it says it's selling you a ticket for $15, you click on it, you know what your total is? $15. They don't add a bunch of fees or anything like that onto it. They tell you exactly what you're paying for, so that's what you know what you're getting. And they show you, if you travel with the Reds, or if you just go to another city and want to see another stadium, they can show you your view from your seat before you even buy your ticket. That way you're not stuck behind a pole, or you got some kind of weird angle to the plate, something like that. Check out the Game Time app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. So there you go. Great prices, plus your first purchase, you get $20 off with the code LOCKEDONMLB. Download the Game Time app today and start getting to the game the best way you can with Game Time, because they've got the last minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds. Also, make sure you bookmark the website CincinnatiRedsTalk.com. That's the Sports Illustrated site that Steve, myself, James Rapine, Rick Uccino, Greg Kuffner, Austin Elmore, we're all writing for it. A lot of great content over there in written form at CincinnatiRedsTalk.com. All right, Steve, we talked about the good. Let's spend a moment before we jump into our questions and comments. I know we got a lot of folks in the chat today. Appreciate everybody joining in on the live show. Get your questions, get your comments in, get your takes in on who's the MVP, who's the best pitcher, and who's the most disappointing player for you. Because I definitely think if we were to break it down positionally and pitching wise, I think we definitely have a positional player. We definitely have a pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to get your thoughts on this, because who would you mark as a bigger disappointment to this point? I think that there are three contenders. I think it's Will Benson, I think it's Graham Ashcraft, and I think it's Alexis Diaz. Who of the three is the most disappointing?
Well, first off, shout out to Kerry Reinhardt, because we're in lockstep
Nailed it.
on this. For me, I don't think, I don't think there's an overall biggest disappointment. I think you've got to look at it through this lens: pitcher, position player. For me, pitcher is Graham Ashcraft and position player is Will Benson, because both of these guys we were looking for to take the next step. Both of them we were looking for in their roles to be stabilizing forces. For Graham Ashcraft, we knew he wasn't the ace, but we wanted him to be the middle of the rotation guy that you could count on to be your Tom Browning, that you could count on to be your workhorse that just went out there, worked quickly, did his job, got it done, isn't super flashy, but is reliable. Graham Ashcraft has been nothing close to that at all in 2024. He's been very inconsistent. He's been very unreliable, and the results have been very disappointing. For me, he is the biggest disappointment, the biggest underachiever of the Reds rotation in 2024. Offensively, a lot of those same arguments hold, right? Will Benson was the guy that walked into spring training and said all the right things, said all of the right information, went to David Bell day one and said, I want to play against left-handers. I want to get better. I want to be an everyday guy. And not only did he not become an everyday guy, he became a guy that you don't want out there when there's a right-hander on the mound. In his last 30 days, he's hitting 200, 284, 357. If you want to break down the last 2 weeks, and this includes, by the way, what he did yesterday. In the last 2 weeks, Jeff, 086, 132, 114.
Because those are the only two hits he's had in 2 weeks.
The only two hits he's had in 2 weeks were yesterday. So for me, I hope that much like the calling out of Jeimer Candelario sparked the baseball gods to do a thing to me, bring it on, baseball gods. Will Benson should be in Louisville. I don't care what he did yesterday. He still should be in Louisville. He's taken up a roster spot right now. I still say that you bring up Rhys Hines right now and the performance, it can't drop off. It can't get worse. So there's my biggest disappointment offensively.
I think the corner that he's about to turn is coming. I saw so much hard contact from him in that game, and there were multiple pitchers that he hit it off of. It wasn't just because Miles Michaelis decided that he forgot how to pitch. Like that was a very surprising performance from him, because he's not that bad of a pitcher, but the Reds absolutely destroyed him yesterday. But yeah, it's definitely Will Benson, because he came in, and when you say he was saying all the right things, like he was talking about this offseason, I've been working hard at hitting lefties. I've been working hard to become an everyday player. And you're right. He just hasn't been. You don't even want him to be a rotational player the way that he has been. And this was his opportunity. I almost feel like the Reds not doing what we wanted them to do and go and get a right-handed outfield bat. I felt like the Reds not doing that was a vote of confidence in Will Benson, and it seems as though that was a very foolish thing for them to do, because now they desperately need somebody in the outfield, and I hope they go get him, regardless if Will Benson turns around, because this outfield just really needs an extra bat in there. But the reason that I included Alexis Diaz in these three is because not the save total. Everybody looks at the save total and says, well, he's got 17 saves right now. What are you complaining about? I'm complaining about the fact that for a very long stretch of this first half of the season, he was a guy that when he came out of the bullpen, I cringed. He's the guy that you're supposed to look forward to. And the guy that I was looking forward to is Fernando Cruz, which I love. But I wasn't looking forward to Alexis Diaz coming out of the pen. Every time, the lights shut down at Grand American and they started playing his song and stuff, I'm just like, oh, here we go again. Oh, boy. First guy's going to get on in like 4 or 5 pitches because he's going to walk. Oh, boy. Let's see what happens.
Maybe they should just start intentionally walking the first batter, whoever it is, just to save the 4 pitches. Just go get on first base. Let's do that.
It's oh my gosh, it's been such a frustrating watch, and I think that's probably where we get this from, is like, who's been the most frustrating player to watch? And that is who has been the most disappointed, and I think that we have to include him in this. I think that overall, it's hard to argue between Alexis Diaz and Graham Ashcraft. I think that Graham Ashcraft is just... And the funny thing is, like, his ERA and stuff like that isn't even as bad as it was last year before he turned things around. It's just the fact that he keeps going through this stuff. And there was like an outside influence that we could kind of blame on it last year. And, dare I say, even sort of make an excuse for him. There is no excuses for him this year. Like, this is just bad baseball, and he's got to figure it out. And his first start back from Louisville did not make me any more comfortable than when they sent him down. So I'll be interested to see how he moves forward, because with Nick Lodolo on the injured list for load management blister, that he will at least get one more start before they reevaluate. And I can't imagine that they'll send him down right away to Louisville again. So he's going to be up here. He's up here and ready to go.
Right. So let's before we move off of this and get to the Q&A, Jeff, there's a great take. It's a thoughtful take, I think, and something we should probably discuss for a second in the chat as to the biggest disappointments of the year. Now, this is from Honest Fan, who says the biggest disappointment of a pitcher was Emilio Pagan, and there is an argument for that for sure. But here's the thing that I think is a little thought-provoking. The biggest disappointment of a position player in 2024, Noelvi Marte. And that's spot on if you're looking at it through the lens that this is intended, which is, he got into game 81, so he can be included in this conversation. Was he going to go 2 for 3 every day during the first half? No.
Yes, I'm just kidding.
But the impact that he can have, that we knew he could have, that we thought he would be, showed it right out of the gate in that first start. And the fact that he, through stupidity, no other word for it, through stupidity, allowed what happened to happen. Mr. I don't know how the stuff got in there. Yes, you do. Stop it. That is the biggest disappointment, I think, of, injuries happen, things happen, stuff happens. But this one thing was completely, totally preventable, should have never happened, should have never been a thing. And Noelvi allowed it to happen. So that is a tremendous, huge, giant disappointment.
That's 100% fair, because I see their reason. I see Honest Fan's reasoning for picking both those players, and that's because availability. Like, availability is the best ability. Why do we look at Nick Senzel and say that his tenure was a disappointment? Why do we look at Cody Reed and say that he was a disappointment? I mean, sure, Cody Reed wasn't that great when he was healthy, but he was hurt all the time. I mean, there's so many guys that you can put on this list and just say, well, he was hurt. He just wasn't here. He wasn't on the field. And you can go cross sports. You could go basketball. You can go football. I think of the Bengals. Think of Tyler Eifert. He's a disappointment because he wasn't on the field. If you cannot play, then what's the point? And I think that he's got a very good argument with Noelvi Marte, because he even wasn't hurt. It was just because of a bad decision, he cost his team a half a season. And I think that more than anything is such a great proponent for the way that baseball has set up the whole performance enhancing drugs, like, suspension tree. Because now if he's stupid again and does something dumb again, he's out for an entire year. There is no, okay, well, you go from 80 to 90. You go from 80 to 162. And that's why we were so concerned whenever he was saying things like, I don't know how it happened. It's like, well, you better figure it out if you really, truly don't know. And hopefully, if you do know and you just don't want to say because it's going to look even worse than the fact that you got suspended, then please don't do it again. Because if you do it again, then we get to write your name off the list for an entire year, and that is just so detrimental. There's no way that Nick Krall could plan for that, unless they knew that ahead of time, but I don't think that that's a thing either. So, no, I think he's got a really fair argument there that if you're just not on the field, then what's the point?
All right, Jeff, let's move into the Q&A portion of this thing, and this is as good a place as any because we're on the Noelvi Marte topic, and that's the most recent chats here. So if you're in the chat, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. Click that like button for me. Since you're here, click the subscribe button if you haven't done so. If you haven't done so, I'd be shocked. I think all you guys are here every single time we go live, and I love it. But click that like button, click the bell, click the subscribe button. We really appreciate you being here. Let's continue this conversation about Noelvi for just a minute, because I think that the fact that he was so bad during his rehab starts down in Louisville had us all kind of scratching our head a little bit. And I would be lying if I said I didn't have a thought of, well, I wonder if it was the juice. Is the juice what was making him so good? Because he looks really, really bad. But, clearly that was not the case. Moving forward with him, Jonathan asked an interesting question. If Marte never hurt his hamstring, does he never get popped for PEDs trying to make it back in time, though? I don't know that the hamstring is the beginning of the PEDs. We don't know because he won't. There's a lot of speculation, and Noel V has not really fessed up about all of this. So I think if there's a guy
that would have been, by the way, that would have been an easy explanation.
Yeah.
That would have been an easy thing to say instead of I don't know. The fact that he still chose to say I don't know over saying, well, it was something about it, I was trying to get back, all that. Like, honestly, I would have accepted that if he would have said, hey, look, I got hurt. I was trying to make sure that I was ready to get back in time. It's like, you know what? It's a bonehead move, but I understand it. But he chose to say I don't know. So I feel like which doesn't make me feel any better about the situation, but it feels like there's something else involved, which
I think the whole situation comes off to me like this, Jeff. I feel like this is a guy that more than anything else wanted to be a successful big leaguer, was willing to do anything to make it happen, was young, dumb, and living in the place of, I'll be the guy that never gets caught. That will be me. I think that's what Noel V told himself, and it didn't work. And he cost his team, and it's tremendously disappointing, but he served his time, so to speak. He paid his dues. It hurt us as fans. It hurt the team. But now it's time for him to move forward and keep his nose clean, as you say, because he'll end up a whole year in suspension land if he does not. But I want nothing but good things for Noel V. Marte moving forward. I think he can be tremendous in what he can do for this team. Honest Fan says Fraley needs to get on that Marte special vitamin regime. Fraley's power and the absence of it, Jeff. I know he had that bout of bronchitis that really just left him weakened. He lost something like 10 pounds, 15 pounds while he was sick. He's using inhalers in the dugout, just trying to be able to get out there and play. And he hasn't really been right from a power standpoint ever since. Now, he clearly can still hit the ball. He has been really good when used in the proper situations, to the point where, people want to see more of him. But is the power ever going to come back?
I think so. I think we're seeing it come back. Like over the last the month of really good hitting that I've talked about, he slugged over 500, and we've seen so many hard hit line drives. I mean, last night there were a couple of line drives that he hit that I'm like, does that have a chance? Like, I don't. You can tell whenever you're watching a game on television and they're at home, you can kind of tell how things are going to roll. And then they go on the road, and when a fly ball hits the air, you don't necessarily know. But he was absolutely roping some line drives last night. So I think that the power is returning. I always wonder a little bit, what is the top of the power for him overall? Is this something that, wait, I'm just now realizing, were we talking about India or Fraley?
Fraley.
Aha. I was talking about India. So, yes, analysis of India. Jake Fraley, on the other hand, yes, I am worried about. He hasn't been hitting the ball very hard lately at all. I was trying to split my attention because I thought I saw something about TJ Friedel and I was trying to figure it out. Oh my gosh.
That's funny. Folks, look, welcome to Live Locked on Reds, where Jeff saw a squirrel. That's exactly what happened. If you watch this back, right before he talks about Jonathan India, you'll see him look off to the side there. He saw a squirrel and completely lost track of what we were talking about. That was why I put Joseph Gaditza's comment up, which says, I feel for Fraley. No doubt he's been through a lot with his family. He's hitting 277, but the results really haven't been there. He's an easy guy to root for. He is. I think the power is going to come back. I think that there are a lot of things on the periphery for Fraley this year, between his family stuff, between him being sick himself, between the wonkiness that has been the Reds lineup and the amount of shuffling and shifting and everything that has gone on. I look for a big second half from Fraley because he's been hitting the ball. He's been making contact fairly consistently, but the power's got to get there. And I think now that we're into the summer months, the ball is going to fly better at Great American Ballpark. It's going to fly better in general throughout baseball. I think that's a helpful tool for Jake Fraley. I think it'll all come together. He'll be able to hit some home runs down that right field line at GABP, and the ship will right itself a little bit.
And he went.
Now, do you have a real Fraley take there, Jeff? We're talking about Jake Fraley.
Yes. I pulled my own impression of the debate from last night. When it comes to Jake Fraley, I feel as though
comment section, don't do it. Let's not fall for that.
I wasn't singling out any one candidate. They both did it. But I when I look at Jake Fraley, I mean, dude went through an off season of just a whole lot of turmoil and all the stuff that went on with his daughter and stuff. You cannot just write off the fact that dude might be distracted a little bit. And, as otherworldly as the competitive nature is for a professional athlete, and as otherworldly as most of these athletes have, this great focus for stuff, that's the kind of thing that would cut through, even for, I think, for Jake Fraley. So I think there's still got to be a little bit of residual distraction there. And look, I don't blame him at all. And hopefully it's something that he can kind of work through. And the second half of the season, we do see that power because we've seen it before. And it's not as if he hasn't had it. It's just this season, for some reason, he has not been hitting the ball very hard at all.
There was times that he hit the ball well enough and for enough power that was used as the cleanup guy. Like he was considered a viable option to be the cleanup hitter. Yeah. Right. Viable option. So I think that will return. All right, let's go to this from Chris. I see you guys in the comment section. Back to the most disappointing part of the Reds. It's easy. It's the medical staff. Steve moved to Cincinnati and become the team doctor, or at least teach these people basic anatomy. All right, first of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm an ER trauma nurse. If the Reds guaranteed me a job, I would go back to school and get my NP. I'd become a nurse practitioner just to help take care of the Reds. So I'll just put that out there. But this point is not lost on me, though. If I was allowed to change one thing right now in order to try to give the Reds a leg up for the second half, it would be to fire everybody that has had anything to do with the medical evaluations in the first half of this season. And I took some heat for that in the chat on the last show that I was with you, Jeff, but I stand by it. People were questioning, well, why fire everybody? You can't help that players get hurt. And that's true. People are going to get hurt. It's a sport that's played at a high level. People are going to get injured. But I don't remember another time where we've ever had one instance of a player being so in disagreement with a day-to-day pronouncement from the team that they go get a second opinion and end up with surgery. I don't ever remember that happening. And it's happened twice this year. So
I was going to say, it's becoming a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's happened twice this year. I can't imagine that there's anybody left in that clubhouse that hurts anything, and the doctor tells them, it's nothing, day to day. You'll be ready to go in a week. There's not a guy in that clubhouse that's not already on their phone calling for somebody else outside the organization to evaluate. I mean, this is their livelihood. This is their careers. And when you have that type of situation playing out, it's time to start over. The Reds medical staff was overhauled at the beginning of 2022. They made drastic changes. They added people to the staff. They created new roles. They got modern with it a little bit. And clearly it ain't working. Changes need to be made. So if there's one thing I can do, that's what I'm doing.
Well, and what's a bummer is you remember hearing things from some folks closer to the situation than us about Joey Votto and about how he was being told one thing and then he found out from a second opinion a little while after, because he didn't know at the time to go get a second opinion right away. He found out from a second opinion a little while after that you shouldn't have done that. You should have done something completely different. So that goes back to last year that stuff like this is being happening. You know what they say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on the Reds medical staff.
Exactly. All right, let's move off to medical staff. Again, I'll go back to college if the Reds guarantee me a job. Let's move off of this and talk about, where'd it go? Sorry, things moved on me here. I wanted to talk about this because you and I kind of talked about this before we went live, Jeff. Carey says tonight will be the test to continue the offense run. Let's not lose the series. I told you, Jeff, that before we went live, that yesterday's win didn't mean anything. Yesterday's win was no different than this Reds team has been all along. In fact, it was exactly on brand with what this Reds team has been and how disappointing they've been. They go out, they start off a series, they kick the snot out of the opponent, and they lose the series. They've been inconsistent, they've been unreliable, and you never know what you're going to get when they take the field. Yesterday was on brand. for them to change the narrative, for them to make me feel like, oh, they can make a push and stay relevant in the wild card and try and right the ship. All of those things. They have to win the series. And I know it's a 4-gamer. That's hard to do. Everybody would be perfectly happy with a split. Probably not me. They need to win this series. That's different. That's not the same old. That is an improvement. Go out there, kick the Cardinals' asses and win the series. That's something new.
Baseball is such a hard sport to carry over momentum with because you face different pitchers, the lineup changes and all that different stuff. But there was something to Thursday night's game and the whole thing with Tyler Stevenson. I'm not saying that they're going to be able to do that every day, obviously, but could they have like a chief distraction officer or something like that like they're all getting ready and they're like, all right, let's get fired up for the game. Let's get loose. Let's get stretched. Let's get ready to go, get our hacks in, get ready to play. And then like right before they're getting ready to start the game, some dude comes in with like a computer screen with the little box and it's just like, wait for it to hit the corner. Wait for it to hit the corner. Hey, it's the corner. All right, let's go. And just distract everybody for a second, take their mind off of baseball and then be like, all right, let's go play ball. Because it feels like there was like a catharsis. There was a release whenever Tyler Stevenson got the call that he had to go back and now he's going to be a dad and that's awesome. And it felt like the entire team celebrated with him. The entire team was taken out of the baseball mood for a minute. And then they were thrown back into the game and then they were just like fresh and ready to go, loose and let's play. Because it just seems like they get into these modes where they're in their own heads and they're going through these slumps and they're trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark on every single pitch and hit a grand slam with the bases empty and all that other stuff. I feel like there are moments where they just need to be zapped out of it. And maybe that is something they need to look into. I don't know. But there was some sort of different way that they approached that game yesterday. And it was evident from the very first inning on, and Miles Mikolas just couldn't figure it out. Like, he was throwing everything up to the plate. If it was off the plate, they knew it. Because you even saw, like, sometimes the umpire would call a strike that was off the plate, and, one of the Reds at the plate would just shake their head. And then the very next pitch, they'd smash it into the gap in the outfield. Because that's what they did a lot of doubles yesterday. But overall, they got to figure it out, how to carry this momentum over, because you're right. Like, I gave the stat on today's podcast earlier that they have lost 8 series in which they've won the first game of the series. Mm-hmm. You're playing with house money after you win the first game of the series. How do you just hand that house money back?
Those losses have been the bullpen blows the lead. Those losses have been inconsistent play, right? It's been those many series that this team should have won.
Bad fielding.
Bad fielding, errors, a reliever just absolutely not having it. Stuff that is preventable is my point. Stuff that if you're playing fundamental baseball, if you're being consistent and you're going about your work, as Joey Votto would have put it, you win those series. And I think that's been the most frustrating thing of all. As banged up as this team has been, as hurt as they've been, as revolving door, Mr. Zalewski or whatever the hell his name was, pitcher coming up from Louisville that nobody's ever heard of, as bad as this season has been, thank you. You know me and names.
Yasser Zulueta.
Yeah, I was never going to try and say that. So there you go. As bad as it's been with that, and as very 2022 as that is felt, think back to the catcher situation in 2022, as close as this has been to that, this team has still performed and been in positions to win series. They hold the season series against the Phillies. They hold the season against the frickin' Dodgers. They hold their season series against the Diamondbacks, right?
I think so.
Didn't they take that by one game?
Yes.
Yeah, there's been signs of life is what I'm saying. And it's just so frustrating because they were in a position to really get it done and they did not. I want to talk about this, Jeff, because I guess no first half recap.
Sorry, I'm wrong. They do not hold it against the Diamondbacks.
Not in their zone. Okay.
Point taken.
Yes. No half season review, no mid-season check-in for us would be complete without this conversation. So here we go. Biggest surprise is Stu. No, it is not. Stuart Fairchild was always a bubble player. I called him Mr. 4A baseball player, and he's had moments. I will give you that he's had moments, and some of those moments have been all-star level defense, but also some of those moments have been him appearing to forget that he was on a baseball field. Some of those moments have been big, giant at-bats. Some of those moments have looked like Jeff would have had a better at-bat. So when you talk about a team that I'm labeling inconsistent, you're talking about a player that I'm labeling inconsistent. I have graduated him from 4A to back of the bench kind of guy, useful platoon player in certain situations. When you're talking about his overall numbers, Jeff, last 30 days, 242, 315, 333. Not terrible. On the season, 226, 302, 644. Okay, when he's used in the right situation, he can be valuable. The last 15 games, the last 2 weeks, 189, 231, 243. He's not in an uptick right now. He's not in a super good place, and he's been playing against right-handed pitching, and that's why. He'll have moments. We've seen him. He got some hits against a righty recently. But no, he's not a big surprise. He's exactly who I thought he was.
Yeah, I would say that he is meeting the expectations.
And I'm just now getting that I'm just now getting that I just got trolled, by the way. I am just nice work. Good job, honest fan. And just now I'm snapping to the fact.
I love rooting for him, but yeah, like, I mean, I don't want to see him up there. I was happy that he hit Miles Michaelis, and there's a reason that he was in there because, like we said, the Reds had one bench player last night because they just didn't have anybody available. But I don't want to see him if they can avoid it against a right-handed pitcher. I want to see him against lefties. Out in the field, I feel pretty good about him. But look, if Nick Krall can go upgrade him at the deadline, he should. People dunking on you, not realizing that you're trolling.
No. There's a comment I'm not going to put up, but it's freaking hilarious. It's, if you're looking in the chat, it's directly above this one that we're going to talk about from Connor Webster. Connor Webster, who do you think is poised for the biggest turnaround of the second half of the season? This is a great question, Jeff. This could probably actually be a whole show, but just for a knee-jerk reaction, biggest turnaround, biggest guy that's going to turn it on in the second half. Oh, I think it's going to be TJ Friedel. I think he's going to come back and he's going to have his health right the rest of the way, and he's going to be the MVP of the second half for this lineup. I'm going TJ Friedel.
I think it's hard to pick against Will Benson because if he doesn't turn it around, then there's going to be questions had about his future in the major leagues. Like he's got some work that he needs to do, but we saw it last year where he was just absolutely unusable for the first month of the season, and then he was absolutely fantastic the rest of the way because there was, I mean, when you look at what he was doing last year, it's that they were limiting the number of times he faced lefties. They were putting him in the best positions. I think they just got to go back to that. Like, I hate the fact that we have to punt the idea that Will Benson can be an everyday player, but there's not a ton of everyday players on everyone's team anymore. Like, there are a lot of teams in baseball, the Dodgers included, that have guys who you don't want hitting against righties or you don't want hitting against lefties, and that's just how it goes. Like, there's so much strategy that goes into an everyday lineup anymore that is why you look at a guy like Will Benson and you just like stop trying to force the square peg into the round hole and hit him against right-handed pitchers and set him against lefties.
This from Scott Campbell. What record did the Reds need to have in order for you to feel comfortable for adding at the trade deadline? Let's not do that. I don't want to do the trade deadline, Scott, but you got me thinking about something else, which is what record do the Reds need to have in the next 81 games to be in the playoffs? So we'll circle back to add or sell, but let's do record for me to say there'll be a reason for October baseball. They've got to win 45 games out of the next 81. 45 wins out of the next 81 puts them at 45, 55, 65, 75, 83 wins. That would give them 83 wins. They have to win 45 games between now and the end of the season.
45 out of 81 would put them, what's that, 9 games over 500 for the rest of the year?
Yeah.
10 games over 500?
10 games.
Something like that.
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
I think it's doable. I mean, and we've not talked about this a lot. There's a lot of folks like on Reds Twitter and the Reds blogosphere that have talked about this a lot, that, boy, the schedule looks real nice around the All-Star break. You've got a lot of teams that it feels like the Reds match up really well against. We did this before in years past. 2021, I remember talking about the September of rainbows and pots of gold and easy baseball. And I think they went under 500 in that month. You just got to make sure you play the game. So I don't want to get too excited about an easy schedule, but if you're telling me they have to go 10 games over 500, then I think they could definitely do that. For Scott's question in particular, I think as long as they're around 500, and it doesn't even have to be at 500, but like if they're like 2 or 3 games under 500, I think that they could go make a move. Because I feel like Nick Krall's been calling folks and been setting up some potential deals, because every time he talks about a trade, there's only been, I feel like Sam Maul was the only trade where Nick Krall has said, yeah, I basically called them that day and the deal happened. Like, he is a guy that he calls them, lets them stew on it for a bit, calls them, checks up on it. Like, he calls them early. I think he's already called the A's on Rooker. I think he's already called the Marlins on a possible deal there. Like, I think he's got some feelers out there, and then he's going to figure out what makes sense for the team at the deadline.
Is it record though, Jeff? Is it around 500, at 500, or do you look at the wild card picture and say, if this team is less than, so if this team is within 4 games, 5 games at any given point, trade deadline's approaching, you're within, they're 3.5 out of a wild card spot right now. If you're still in that lane, that says to me, well, go fix something, right? So, so I think you're talking about the realism of a wild card spot. If you're within striking distance at the trade deadline and 4 games back of a playoff spot is within striking distance for sure, you go fix a hole, whether it's bringing in an outfielder, bringing in another reliever, you do something. What he can't do is nothing. And I think there's going to be a temptation for Nick Krall to do nothing. And I don't like that. The prospect capital is not what it once used to be, Jeff. There's some struggles going on down in the minors with more than one guy. There's some injuries plaguing other guys. And I think that might make things a little harder. And baseball is such now that there may only be 10 buyers in all of baseball at the trade deadline. And that's going to drive prices up. That's going to drive things up. So it's going to be hard for Nick Krall to make a move, but I think he has to do something.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like he knows that. Like, I think the Reds are either buyers or sellers. I don't think there's a world where they stand pat. And by sellers, I don't think that they sell the farm, because it's not like they've got guys to sell. They've got a couple of short deal free agents that they signed, and they could probably trade those guys, but you're not trading the bulk of the team. So I think if that is the only thing that we're talking about, then he's going to go make a move, and I'm expecting it to be a move like the Reds made a couple of years ago when they traded for the following year, when they got a guy who had multiple years of control. I think that's probably the move that we see them make.
That's probably fair. And just let's talk about cost for just a minute, because it's going to cost. They're going to have to give up some players that could be ultimately very, very exciting. I don't think a meaningful upgrade at the trade deadline will happen for any deal for the Reds that doesn't involve Cam Collier. That's going to be everybody's starting point. Everybody's going to have him on that list. And I don't know what else the Reds have that they'd be willing to give up with that could get him off the list. So, the fact that Edwin Arroyo wrecked his shoulder, that keeps him off the list this year. You look at the rest of the players, it's probably Cam Collier, and then you build around that. So everybody kind of needs to start getting prepared for that. If you want this team meaningfully upgraded, there's going to be a cost.
Let's play this game for just a moment on this, because I don't want to go too long on it. But say there are 2 possibilities for a trade. You're getting, and I'm not saying who, it's just, let's put it this way. The Reds are getting what they need coming back. And they have 2 options of who they're going to send out. They're either going to send out a trade package of Cam Collier and Lyon Richardson, or you can trade a hurt Edwin Arroyo and Chase Petty. Which are you picking?
Collier Richardson.
Okay.
Richardson, we kind of know what he is. He could be a back of the rotation guy, probably ends up being a bullpen guy. Cam Collier, tremendous, like huge upside. I've talked about this. He reminds me of Ellie's first Daytona year right now. But the question is, where does that go? Does it become an Ellie thing, or does it only ever be a single A baseball thing? We don't know. So if it means playoffs now, I trade Cam Collier and Lyon Richardson, and we'll see what we've got in Edwin Arroyo when he comes back from injury.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I think that there's probably a willingness to trade for a hurt prospect if you know that they're just really that good. And so people are probably still going to say, yeah, Arroyo's not off the table. You probably just have to upgrade, what else is in the deal. So that's why I say that. And yeah, Arroyo and Petty on paper sound like a really high overbid. But my big thing with this, and I know everybody loves to hoard prospects. If you can get the guy you need, and that guy's ready now, the Reds are there. The Reds are to the point where they can get that guy who's ready now and really take a big step forward. In years past, the last couple of years, even last year, really, if you were to trade prospects away and add a guy who's really good, you were still one or two guys who are really good away. I feel like the Reds are there now. If they go get like a Brent Rooker and maybe a relief pitcher, we could be talking about a wild card chase.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if Nick Krall can do that, I'm not going to be sitting here, clutching my prospects and just being like, why did we trade away a guy that isn't going to be ready in 3 years? Like, in 3 years, this team could be really good. I want this team to be really good right now. And as long as they're not trading away the farm, like, I go back to the whole Dylan Cease reported trade. I don't want that. But if you're talking about two prospects, I can stomach two prospects.
Oh, we've hit some nerves, Jeff. Daniel says the Reds are not close to a World Series contender this year. That's the same thing that everyone said about the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Were the Diamondbacks last year?
Yeah.
Were the Diamondbacks last year? Like, were the Phillies 3 years ago? The Phillies were the last wild card in, and they made the World Series. 3 of the last 5 years, the last wild card spot in made the World Series. It's funny because, like, baseball is set up, the best team after 162 games is not necessarily the World Series champion. And in most cases, they aren't. So all you got to do is get to the dance. You just have to be good enough to be the top 6. And then anything can happen, especially with this pitching staff.
Pierre says you can't trade Cam Collier. He has 40-plus homer at GABP potential, basically.
Maybe.
How do we know? We don't know. We don't know. I mean, if you can make a move now, you make a move now. I just the Reds are past the point of, well, let's wait and see how much more youth movement we can get, because you just don't know.
Right.
You at some point have to take a risk. And I think with what's going to potentially be coming back from injury, and you take a risk and you bring in some new blood and you get into the tournament, I like this starting rotation in 7-game series.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that, especially matching up against most teams. I think the hardest team to match up against will be the Phillies, because their pitching staff is just ridiculous.
From Chris. MLB playoffs is like March Madness now. Upsets all the time can happen. Exactly this. This is what baseball, I think, was shooting for. And they have accomplished it. Yeah,
because look, the playoffs used to be situated way back in the day where you had the best team from the American League play the best team from the National League, and that was the World Series. And there were so many other good teams that would be playoff teams today that didn't make the playoffs because it was exclusive and it was all about who is the best 2 teams and all this other stuff. If you really want it to be about who's the best 2 teams, you'll go back to that old-timey playoff thing. That's not what it's about anymore. It's about, ad revenue on television and how many different games can they televise and all this other marketing stuff. So the playoffs are going to be big, and you're going to have this ability to make it to the World Series. And quite frankly, here's another point with this, because I feel like there are a lot of other folks that when they really love the idea of hoarding prospects, their argument is, well, this team's not going to win the World Series anyway, so why make the trades? That shouldn't be the goal. Just win a freaking playoff series. They haven't done that since 1995. If you're telling me they got the ability to do that, which they absolutely do with this pitching staff, if they make a wild card series, you can win that wild card series, and then boom, then you start seeing the dominoes fall. because I really feel like this team has that ability if they get everybody back, and especially in years to come, because this year's just been so crazy with injuries and stuff like that. I don't feel like it's going to be this way every single year with the injuries thing. Like, look at the Phillies. The Phillies just now placed Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber on the IL at the same time, but they've been super healthy all year long. And because they've been super healthy, they've been the best team in baseball. That's really what it boils down to, is who stays the healthiest. And the Reds got enough talent that when they're the healthiest, they could be one of those best teams.
Let's do a couple more, and then we've crossed the hour mark, Jeff, but let's do a couple more. This from Scott. It's hard to be positive about the trade deadline any year because of how little, if anything, the Reds have done in the past. Yeah, I get that. I get that. But, you know, Nick Krall, for the most part, has set a course and stuck to it and is trying to do a thing. And he has said that there would be targeted upgrades along the way when there needed to be targeted upgrades. Not just going to trade for the sake of trading, but if there's a deal out there that benefits the Reds, he's not afraid to go and make it. I got to believe that. He's pretty much been true to his word on everything else he said he was going to do during this stretch. So let's see how this trade deadline goes. Because again, as I just said, they can't do nothing. They do nothing. Then I would be willing to get on board the same old Reds chant, I think, Jeff. But this is a time for Nick Krall to put his money where his mouth is, his money being the prospect capital, and upgrade this team to keep them relevant and in contention.
I would agree about the standing pat and not doing anything, because this year it just feels so, not obvious, but it feels very good that the Reds will do something good. I go back to 2021 and they didn't really do much at the trade deadline there either. Which was kind of annoying to see. But, like, I mean, last year they went and they got Sam Maul whenever they were still in it. And quite frankly, they should have done a lot more. But, I mean, 2020, they had, or no, it was no 2019, they had a good trade deadline. They go and they get Trevor Bauer, and he pitches amazingly for them in 2020. I just think that there are certain deals that they're going to go make. And Nick Krall has told us, as the season started, that he's got the flexibility to make in-season deals. So I think that that's coming. I don't think they're going to stand pat.
All right, let's end with this from Mr. Snell here. The Reds, who he loves, are missing the mark on marketing Ellie. They could do so many exclusives with him and his name. What an opportunity. I think baseball is finally getting on Ellie Mania. You see him on all of the national preview highlight flashes stuff. Are the Reds missing the mark? Well, we saw what the Ellie Bobble did and the need for all of the Cincinnati Police Department to be at Great American Ballpark for crowd control on Ellie Bobble Day. Could the Reds do more? I think they probably could. I don't know that that's a completely wrong observation. I think some of this, though, Ellie's name, Ellie, some of that is on Ellie. Some of that is Ellie and his management signing deals and doing things and creating opportunities. So, you know, it's not like the old days where the team kind of just controlled everything about you and they were the ones in charge of that. We've seen Ellie go sign with Jumpman, you know, and do the Nike brand thing. We've seen Ellie, you know, continue to gain national prominence. We've seen Ellie create a buzz in this city. The Reds, I think, will do more things where they can with him. I don't know what specific examples I could give of things the Reds should be doing in order to promote him more.
Another reason to really get this team into the playoffs is that when you do stuff in the playoffs, that's when nationally people take notice of you. But even just on the local side of things, like, I kind of find it funny that this is the first year I'm seeing Hunter Green in like local commercials. Hunter Green's been up for a couple of years now. So I think that maybe next year we'll see Ellie in some local commercials, especially with, you know, he's worked on his English quite a bit and you can definitely hear it, that he is speaking it very well. So you could see that going down with different car companies, or maybe there's a Skyline commercial with Ellie in it or something. I don't know what that would look like, but I could see him being utilized a lot more for marketing next year. And nationally, I mean, he's all over baseball cards and stuff. Topps. Yep. I mean, Topps has like so many different variants Like, I got this one out of Top Series 1. That's just like a special occasion, like, card that they have available. They have multiple different cards like that. And I think there was one, too, that was really cool because Topps has this set this year called Dynamic Duos. And they just pick, like, stars of today and yesterday from teams. And there's a dynamic duo of Ellie and Johnny Bench on a card. I'm like, ooh. Got to get me one of them. But no, I think that people are noticing it, but he's barely been up here long enough for anybody to notice him. So I think that probably next year they really take off with that marketing thing, because unlike football and unlike basketball that really market their rookies even before they really take off, baseball tends to wait a minute on guys. Like Corbin Carroll is starting to be in some like Gatorade ads and Nike ads and things like that, but that's this year. That's after his Rookie of the Year season. So it takes them a little bit more time to pick up on good baseball players.
All right, I think that is a good stopping point, Jeff. That is going to do it for this live edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks everybody for hanging out in the chat.
Yeah.
Before you go, click the like button if you haven't done it yet. Let's get those numbers up. We appreciate you guys so much. We love talking baseball with you. Share the show with your friends, your family. Teach your grandmas and your grandpas how to get on YouTube. Make sure that they're watching the show as well. We appreciate you. We love talking Reds baseball with you. We'll be back in your feeds next week to talk about the St. Louis Cardinals series, which we hope is a W for the Cincinnati Reds. Until then, we will keep you locked on Reds each and every day.
Get to watch the Reds face Sonny on Saturday.
Uh-oh.